Good morning. Cultural Curio here with the top 10 most interesting places in Haight Ashbury. Number 1. Chutes Water Park. Haight Ashbury is one of San Francisco's most iconic and historic neighborhoods. The neighborhood is bordered by Golden Gate Park on one side, Buena Vista Park to the east, and Ashbury Heights and Coal Valley to the south. The district was named after exchange banker Henry Haight. Ashbury Street is named after his nephew, Monroe Ashbury, who sat on the SF Board of Supervisors from 1864 to 1870. Chutes was an amusement park located between Cole and Clayton Streets between 1895 and 1902. In its heyday, Chutes had a water park, a shooting gallery, 2 merry-go-rounds, a casino, a roller skating rink, a zoo, and the Chutes Theater, which hosted vaudeville acts of the time, all on the Haight Street grounds. On March 6, 1902, Chutes lost its lease due to a transfer of property ownership. Number 2. 122 Lion Street. Janis Joplin was born in Port Arthur, Texas, on January 19, 1943. She would tragically pass away of a heroin overdose in Los Angeles in the early 1970s. She left an indelible mark on music with her beautiful, soulful voice that still resonates today with the same pain, heartache, and emotion that it did in the 1960s. During the short 27 years of Janis Joplin's life, she lived in 2 separate locations in the Haight Street district. The first one is in the top of this building at 122 Lion Street. Number 3. 1472 Haight Street. In 1967, Janis Joplin was dating Country Joe McDonald from Country Joe and the Fishes. He lived in a commune above 1472 Haight Street. Number 4. 1510 Haight Street. In 1967, Janis Joplin had an FWB named Peggy Caserta, who was the owner of a clothing shop near the corner of Ashbury on Haight Street. This store was called Manasadika, which was located inside of the Doolin Larson building at 1510 Haight Street. Peggy Caserta was allegedly the creator of the bell-bottom jeans, which were first crafted by seamstresses employed at her shop. Number 5. 710 Ashbury Street. 710 Ashbury is perhaps the most famous house in the Haight Street area. This is the house that the Grateful Dead lived in the 1960s. This house was more of a flop house than a residence in those days. A continuous parade of young women, drug addicts, runaways, and occasional members of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang cycled through the doors of this rundown home in 1967. Number 6. 636 Cole Street. Charles Mills Manson was born on November 12, 1934 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Manson grew up on and off with his emotionally detached mother and spending time in boys' schools. After a series of juvenile acts of rage and violence, Charles Manson exited into adulthood. The violent behavior continued through 2 marriages and 1 child that saw Manson first sentenced to prison in Chillicothe, Ohio, and the second time in Los Angeles, California, on Terminal Island in the 1950s. After Manson's release in 1967, he moved from Los Angeles to Berkeley, California, having heard the scene in the Bay Area was the place to be. While in Berkeley, Manson began to assemble his cult, the first 2 being Mary Bruner and Lynette Squeaky Fromm. Using LSD and brainwashing, Manson began to assemble followers and moved himself and the girls to 636 Cole Street in the Haight District. Number 7. 715 Ashbury Street, the Hells Angels House. The Hells Angels got its name from a World War II fighter brigade and the movie which had the same name. In 1954 and 1957, the Hells Angels motorcycle gang was established in Oakland and San Francisco, later expanding nationally to New Zealand in 1961. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club had a very large presence in the Haight Ashbury during the late 1960s. They occupied this house at 715 Ashbury Street, right down the street from the Grateful Dead house. Hunter S. Thompson rode with the group for more than a year, befriending Sonny Barger. He left the group after he was violently beaten for confronting a member who he saw abusing a woman. It was described by one writer that the Hells Angels saw themselves as the caretakers of the Haight. That may have been true for a while, as they provided security for concerts all around the area. They helped aid the Huckleberry House for Runaways, which is still around today, and aided the anarchist street theater group, the Diggers, in food distribution, clothing, and medical services to the public. Number 8. 558 Clayton Street, the Haight Ashbury Free Clinic. Dr. David Smith opened the Haight Ashbury Free Clinic in 1967 at 558 Clayton Street. This was the first free medical clinic in the United States. In its heyday, over 400 clients per week would visit the clinic for everything from STDs to drug withdrawal. It was also alleged that LSD experiments were conducted at this clinic during this time. The Haight Ashbury Free Clinic exists today, although no longer free, but as part of the Health Right 360 for-profit health network. Number 9. 635 Ashbury Street. In the late 1960s, Janis Joplin, as well as her FWB, Peggy Caserta, both had apartments in this building at separate times. Number 10. 2400 Fulton Street, the Jefferson Airplane House. 2400 Fulton Street gets an honorable mention, even though that is not technically in the Haight Ashbury area. This house was the home of Grace Slick and Jefferson Airplane in the late 1960s. At the time, the house was painted black and music could be heard vibrating the walls regularly. Jefferson Airplane formed in 1965 in San Francisco. They went on to become one of the most prolific psychedelic rock bands of the time. Jefferson Airplane morphed in numbers and band member changes over the years to end up as Jefferson Starship when the band broke up in 1996. The last version of Jefferson Starship included Grace Slick and Paul Kantner, who were the founding members of Jefferson Airplane in 1965.